Howdy. My name is Joseph Clark, and I wish to implement end-tidal CO2 monitoring on all mechanically ventilated patients. So, in our ICUs, we have several patients who are intubated and sedated and on mechanical ventilation. To optimize these ventilation settings, we do morning blood gas draws, where we draw arterial blood and called ABGs, and we determine what changes to the ventilator need to be made to optimize these settings. Potentially, the downside of this is that this is only done once a day, meaning that a patient could potentially have exposure for a long period of time of hypocapnia or hypercapnia. Hypocapnia, as you can see in this poster, has a much higher mortality rate for patients, meaning that we could be harming them with improper ventilator settings. It is my goal to use end-tidal CO2 monitors on all mechanically ventilated patients as sort of an early detection system for suboptimal ventilator settings. What this would prompt us to do is draw a stat ABG to determine if there is suboptimal ventilator settings occurring, and if there are, we can adjust them immediately as opposed to waiting until 4 a.m., 5 a.m. when we draw morning ABGs. Studies show that this reduces mortality rate in mechanically ventilated population. So the proposal is to implement end-tidal CO2 monitoring for all patients receiving mechanical ventilation within all intensive care units. So whose responsibility is that going to be? Well, it's going to be the nurse's responsibility to monitor the end-tidal CO2 as far as on the patient side, meaning that they're going to be monitoring the CO2 levels of the patient. They will be monitoring the respirations on the CO2 monitor. And they will be looking for a sudden change of CO2, which could indicate improper placement, or they would look for a gradual change of CO2, which could indicate improper mechanical settings for the ventilator. Once the range gets to where the provider orders to be notified, we would notify the provider, we would get a stat ABG. Now, the machine itself is going to be monitored by the respiratory therapist. The respiratory therapist is already monitoring all of the tubing and the machine itself currently, so adding the EtCO2 monitor, which as you can see a picture of here, is going to attach to the tubing of the ET tube. So it wouldn't be too much of an additional task assignment for the respiratory therapist. And upon talking to the current respiratory therapist in the facility, they think it would be easily manageable. And as well as talking to the nurses in the facility, this is very well received. Everyone seems to be very well on board. There's a lot of buy-in from both RTs and RNs as far as getting this proposal underway. The goal is to implement end-tidal CO2 monitors on 95% of the ICU patients on mechanical ventilation within a month. And we're going to start assessing to see if there is a positive effect. So the way we're going to determine that is we will hopefully see a reduction of critical CO2 numbers. We will see a reduction of those numbers because we will be able to intervene before it gets to that critical stage, as opposed to waiting until morning before we realize, hey, they are critically hypocapnic, they are critically hypercapnic, and they won't ever get to that point, meaning that we will be able to reduce their mortality rate. That's my proposal. It seems to have a lot of buy-in from not just from the management, but from the nursing staff, from the respiratory therapist staff, and obviously the patients who are going to receive a higher level of care. So, thank you guys. I hope you have a great Christmas break.